All right. So, um, were there ever any drivers that got away from y'all when you were at Penske?
Got away from us? You mean escaped? No, I know what you mean. You mean someone that we tried to hire and weren't able to land? Or, yeah, there was one that stands out in my memory. And it was about 1996, 97 in that era. And, we were on the top of the roll. What people don't understand is I think the 90s were probably the most prolific NASCAR era that there'll ever be. It was full of action, constantly, and a lot of stars and a lot of notoriety. And, some people will argue that the 90s had that big boom because baseball went on strike. And I think they're right. People looked around and said, what is another form of entertainment I might enjoy that has a lot of action? And bang, there was NASCAR, right? So, yeah, so we had our new stock car team that we started in 90, I guess 1990. And our first season was 91. And our single driver was Rusty Wallace. And Rusty, myself, and Roger were all partners in Penske Racing South. And as the years rolled on and we got into the mid to late 90s, everybody was expanding their teams, going from one driver to two drivers, and then to three, and then eventually to four drivers, and finally they put a cap on it. Well, we were one of the few single driver teams, and Rusty and Roger and I sat down one day and said, look, it makes good business sense to have a second driver. And Rusty he really didn't want to do that. He was the star of the show, and rightfully so. He was a good driver. And but the smart thing was to, if you're going to be in the business, you've got to sustain. You've got to stay up with the crowd. You've got to win. You got to win more than once or twice a year. So we said, yeah, we'll look around for for a second driver. And I know Rusty didn't really want to do that, but that was my job. And I had been following open wheel racing because I liked IndyCar racing. I did that for a while with Penske Racing. And the thing that people don't understand about race cars, I guess, in general, is that there are some race cars that demand the highest level of that strain every muscle in your body to control, because the power to weight ratio is so great on some cars, it's just amazing, right? And that type of car was a midget auto racer because they were the most overpowered, ill-handling piece there is. And they attained fantastic speeds, because they were so small, so light, and they had so much power. And those drivers always seemed to develop the one thing that was crucial for a winner, and that's car control. And I always kept an eye on the midget auto racer drivers. In fact, I had USAC, the United States Auto Club, send me records of the wins and who's doing what to who, in the midgets. And it was interesting because some great drivers came out of that group there in the early 90s, including Jeff Gordon, Kenny Irwin, Ryan Newman, several others. And I said, Roger, I'm going to keep looking at the midgets. He said, yeah, you go ahead and do what you have to do and try to, come up with something. And finally, I had an inkling that Kenny Irwin was looking to get into stock car racing. He did a couple of races with another team, a small team, and so I contacted him, and we had a meeting, and I asked him if he'd be interested, and he said, yeah, he would. He really would be interested. And I really liked Kenny. I thought he was a really neat young guy. And this was probably 1997. I'm only guessing now, 96, 97. And so we had a second meeting and, talked to each other again. And he said, Don, I really would like to do it. And I said, okay, let me put together a proposal, and we'll see what we can do, but keep it under your hat. Well, he didn't keep it under his hat, and he let everybody know that he was talking to, Penske Racing. And Robert Yates got wind of it, and Robert and I were good friends, but competitors, And he said, Robert called me up and said, I know you're talking to Kenny Irwin, and I want you to know I'm talking to him too. And I said, oh, great. And so I didn't hear any more for about 2 weeks, and then finally Kenny called me up and he said, I want you to know I'm going to sign a deal with Robert Yates. I was totally disappointed, and I called Roger, and he was disappointed. I called Rusty, and he was happy. But that's just the way it goes at that time. But we kept looking at the USAC drivers, and watched this really young kid, Ryan Newman, coming along, and the rest is history. We talked to Ryan and we landed him later on, but I was totally heartsick when Kenny got killed. I mean, people probably don't remember, but Kenny Irwin, for all his achievements in open wheel racing, he ran about 300 races in open wheel racing. There's no hardly any record of it. He won lots of races. In that one short period of about 3 years, he won 25 or 26 races. I can't remember exactly how many, but I can tell you this: when he got killed, it was like, oh my God, how the heck did that happen? But it was the second guy that got killed in the same year at the same track, and it wasn't the track. It was after they looked at it over the years, it's all come out that he had, in both cases, Adam Petty and Kenny Irwin, the linkage on the carburetor got hooked on the air cleaner and locked the throttle wide open. That's the best scenario that they can come up with. And if you ever see a video or some movie camera footage of the accident, it's brutal. I mean, he just drove the concrete. Yes, if we would have had the safety things that we have now, like the softer walls and all the belts and seats and everything else that are involved, he probably would have still been with us, and Adam would have still been with us. Lessons learned.